So I know some of you like speed painting, so I thought I would show how I'm going to color this image. I drew this angel. She's in the sunshine. And I started to watercolor paint it, and then I thought, well, I'll just do a speed painting so you can watch. I'm going to do a base with watercolor paint, and then I'm going to come back in and add in the details and brighten up the colors using Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2 paints. So sit back and enjoy the music while you watch me bring this to life. Okay, well, I'm a gabber, and trying to do this silently is driving me absolutely nuts because I'm thinking in my head all these things that I want to be telling you that I'm doing. So I just thought I would come back and just do a real quick here. One thing about the Ken Oliver Colorverse powder is it does tend to sprinkle here and there, and so like on her dress, some spots actually blended in because they got onto that area, and then I started to paint it. It's beautiful, and I love the contrast and the color and the depth of it, so it's fine. But for something like the sun, I have little specks of blue in there, and then I'm trying to add my yellow, and it turns obviously green because blue and yellow make green. So if that's something that would bother you to have a little bit of extra colors in there, then do your Kevin Oliver powders last. Color your complete sun, let it dry. Do your wing, do your angel, do whatever it is that you're doing on your page, and leave that background spot till very last, and then do those spots with the Kevin Oliver. Let it completely dry, and then hopefully you can brush away those little tiny little specks that will bleed out and turn into craziness. But the Kevin Oliver powders, look at how pretty that is. It's beautiful. You just add your water to the page, you drop it in, you tap on just a tiny bit, and let me tell you, a little goes a long way, and then you let it just blend out and spread out, and look at that. It's beautiful. In person, it's so pretty. And for her hair, now I just did that in one color of watercolor. I used Jane Davenport Kiss Kiss on that. And for her dress, I used a Winsor & Newton olive green, and I'm going to make that darker with some Caran d'Ache Neo 2 colors. I used gray on her wing because I think it just conveys feathers and a wing. So I like the gray. It to me conveys that it's white feathers. And now I'm going to let this dry, leave it alone for a little bit, and then I'm going to come back in and I'm going to do her skin tones, and I'll have you watch that, and I'll narrate that while I do it. Okay, this is my little basket that has everything skin tone. I have colored pencils. I have different kinds of acrylic paint in all kinds of skin tones and pinks. I have my little Making Faces palette that I created. I have another video about that with Caran d'Ache, where I filled my Caran d'Ache Neo Color 2 into pans, watercolor pans. And then I've got the Jane Davenport watercolors, Daniel Smith watercolors mixed. So I just kind of have created this palette. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started doing faces. Oh, and here's my Caran d'Ache Neo Color 2s. So for faces, what I like to do, and I have shown this before, but it's always fun to watch. So for skin tone, I like to come in and use the Caran d'Ache Flesh. This is the Caran d'Ache Neo Color 2. They're water soluble. And I like to use a base layer of flesh tone. So I'm going to cover her whole face. See, here's what I was talking about. You can't see that, but see how that's a little bit blue? Just a tiny micro fleck of that Ken Oliver powder is on her skin, and it's blending out and it's making a blue cast, which is okay because skin has lots of different casts to it. But next time I would do that background very last instead of skipping ahead and doing that, because I'm getting little flecks here and there. So just a word to the wise: when you do something and you can advise someone else of a trouble that you've had, it certainly is nice to know, okay, don't do that because you might not like it. So I just go in and I do a base coat of flesh tone Neocolor, and I'm going to do that on her face, her whole face, her lips, her nose, everything except for the inside of her eyes, and I'm going to do her hand. Same way, one basic layer. Okay, so there's a base layer on her hand and her chest and her face. I did go over her lips, her nose, everywhere with the same color just to lay down that base. And I'm telling you right now, my way doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way. This is just my process. So I'm just showing you, just to inspire you, show you how I use my supplies. You can try it, see if it works for you. If not, you know, there's a million ways that people do skin and work in their art journals. So I'm just playing and I'm showing you my process while I'm playing. So hopefully you like it and you'll try it because it works for me, but maybe it won't work for you. Everybody's got a different way of doing things. So anyway, the sunlight obviously is coming from the sun, so this side of her face is going to be the one in shadow. So on this side of her nose and on this side of her face, I'm going to add a second layer, and that is just to show that that side is the one away from the light source. So see how it starts to take shape that way. You've got your light source coming down, it's going to hit her face, it's going to hit the highest points like her brow bone and her cheek, so you could put a little bit of a second layer of darkness down there, you know, because her cheek's obviously going to be the brightest highest point, and this part of her lip that sticks up is going to be in the bright white light. So you want to leave those places bright. And then places that are meant to be shadowed, like right here and under her lip, I come in and shadow that. Adding some more of that. And you know, you just kind of play along and play around and let it dry, and then come back in and add some more, because you can layer and layer and layer, which I love with this Caran d'Ache. So, and her neck is going to be bright right here because of the sun, and it's going to be bright on the highest point. So I'm going to leave that. And then her nose is going to have a little bit of shadow underneath that round part of her nose to start giving it shape and character. And these are nice because if you don't like what you've added down, you can wipe them away. I love that. And if I make a mistake or I don't like how something's coming out, I can use an eraser and erase it. I can use a baby wipe and wipe it off and start over. So they're very forgiving. I love that. But sometimes you're tooling along and you think it's going along great and it looks good, and then all of a sudden it's too muddy or it's too dark. So, and this ear is going to be bright because it's in the sun. I'm going over it again because it got some blue on it, which is okay. And then I'm going to take another color. So my next color that I use is an apricot. This is Caran d'Ache Neo Color 2 Apricot. So I'm going to come in here, and on the places that I want a little bit darker, under her chin, because that would be shadowed, cast under here on the crease of her neck, places that you want to add more color to, that's what you do. Just keep layering it. So here's on top of the flesh, I'm using apricot, and I'm going back over those places that I made darker, and I'm adding in another color. So see how it starts to take shape? I love that. It starts to become the character that you're creating. The more you layer, the prettier it gets. And so I'm making this shoulder that's in the shade a little darker. Like that. And like that. And then I can come down here and work on her hand and do some shading there. So you can use flesh, let it dry, use a second color of flesh, then let that dry, and then come in with apricot and start doing some shading in between her fingers, under the edges. And make it start coming to life. That top part of her hand's going to be brighter because it's in the sun. And then let that dry and then keep going. So that's what I'm going to do, is just keep playing along with this and adding some more tones and shades. Now I am going to come back with a golden ochre in Caran d'Ache and come under here, like underneath her nose right here, with that yellow ochre. And see how by doing that it made her nose start to take some shape, because you don't want it to look flat. Noses aren't flat. So you want to shade it in a way that makes it look like it's three-dimensional. And this side of her nose is going to be darker. So I'm going to put a shadow in there. And see how it's starting to make her face come to life. And then I like to use salmon for her cheeks. So to add her cheek color in, I use salmon. And I'm going to my paper towel and I'm kind of drying off my brush so that it's just water for blending it out. Okay, and then I'm going to do some salmon over here because she'd have pink cheeks over here too. And when I let that pink dry, then I go back in and do it again, because see how it starts to blend in and fade. And on her lips, I like to do the top part darkest, like that, and then wipe off the color off my brush so that all you have is a wet brush, no color, and then just kind of pull some of that color down a little bit, like that. And let's see, I also can do a little bit of salmon pink up here in the crease of her eyes. That's always pretty. Not right on top of her eyelid, up above it, so you're putting that salmon in the crease. And that starts to make her eyes look three-dimensional. I'm going to give her green eyes, and for that I like to do yellow green. It's a very, very light, bright color. It's almost like a lime green. And I like to put that in first as the base color when I'm doing a green eye. And then I completely let that dry. And this is just going to give the eye depth, because you don't want it to just be painted one color. Eyes have many, many, many colors in them. But this makes just like hauntingly beautiful green eyes. So there's her bright green eyes. She looks like she's a mermaid or something, but that'll change. After it dries, I'll add another green to it. And while her face is drying a little bit, I'm going to come in and work on her hair some more. This was all done just in one color of watercolor paint. So it does have depth and interest to it, but it needs more colors in it. It's too plain and flat. So I'm going to take the golden ochre, and I'm going to just come in here in a few spots and blend in some golden ochre. And I'm not overdoing it because that first layer was watercolor paint, and I don't want to reactivate it and make it completely move. I just want to add some depth to this color of her hair. So I'm adding in, just not all over, just in a couple places. I'm adding some yellow ochre highlights to it because I want her hair basically to convey that it's redhead hair. But hair is like anything else. It's got lots of tones and lots of colors to it. So by adding that in, it just really brings it to life. So in the places that are really light down here, I'm going to go lightly brush some of this in with a very wet brush and not moving what's on the page already. This is getting laid over the top of the watercolor that's there. And then I'm probably going to go back over it with some more Caran d'Ache in a color that looks like red hair. This is just adding some depth. That's all I'm doing here. And there's a little bit of Kent Oliver blue specks. So that's what I meant. If you don't want that, then do that last. Learn by my mistake. I knew that. I have used his stuff before, so I don't know. I just forgot that it did that, and that's all right. It's adding interest. It'll be very colorful. Okay. I like how that added interest to her hair. And it looks so bright on camera, but it's more subdued in person. Okay, now back to those bright green eyes. I'm taking another color. I'm using emerald green, and I'm just going to pick up a little bit just on the very, very tip of my brush. I don't want to get tons. I just want it on the tip. And I'm going to go in here, and up at the top of her iris, I'm going to dab that green in on both sides. Like that. And I'm going to brush off my brush so there's just water on it. And I'm going to make sure there's not too much water, but I just am going to drag that down around her eye. And then I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to come back in with a third green color. So the third color of green I'm using is a dark green. I'm going to do the same thing. Just tip right on the tip of my water brush some dark green. And I'm going to come back up here and just do the same thing. Tap it around the top, up by her eyelid, on both sides. And then completely clean off my water brush and get most of the water off of the tip, and then just carefully drag a little bit of it down the side edges. I just think that makes the eyes just pop and come to life. I really love that. Now to work on her hair some more, I'm going to use a russet, a cinnamon, and an English red. And I'm just going to come in here and just add some depth, add some color, brighten up. This original base was watercolor, so it's very light. You know how watercolor is. When it dries, it's very light. And Neocolor 2 are more pigmented. And so I can come back in here and just really add some brightness and tones and highlights. And I love that watercolor base look. I love that. And I could do that with the Neocolors, but I like the watercolor paint for the base, and then I like these for adding in the depth and the tones. So I'm going to just play around with those three colors and just add some depth to her hair and make it pop a little bit more so it's not so faded. And then the same thing with her dress. I'm going to come back in with some greens and play around a little bit more with that. And then I'm going to do some pen work. So I'll show you a little bit of pen work and then I'll finish it up and show you the finished product. And my biggest tip would be, don't overwork the piece, you know, like as you're working on this hair and you're adding in some strokes here and there and you really like how it looks, leave it alone. Don't keep adding and messing, and don't overwork the product, because you know these are all water reactive, so the more you brush over them and the more you work them, the more the color and the product is going to move, and you may end up creating mud, or you may end up creating something that you don't like. So that's my biggest tip, is just play, and when you get it the way you like it, walk away and leave it alone so you don't overwork it. So I've just about got my coloring part of it done, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a black Posca pen and I'm going to do some line work around and make the image stand out a little bit more.